It's go time! Ship 33 gets its payload and rolls to the pad with a few surprising changes. Booster 14 finishes its prep work. What's left to do? Musk reveals new launch date, but could he be wrong? And there's a surprising twist regarding the design of SpaceX's Block 2 boosters. My name is Felix, welcome to What About It? Let's dive right in. Starship updates. Excitement is in the air at Starbase as the countdown for Flight 7 is officially underway. The original launch date for Flight 7 was the 10th, or the day this episode is released. However, I'm sure you can tell by now that that's not what happened, as SpaceX was having some troubles with Ship 33. Fortunately, everything worked out as teams began moving at light speed to prepare this ship for launch as soon as possible. While they didn't meet the original launch date of the 10th, we'll likely see a flight soon. We'll talk more about that later. Keep your notifications on and watch out for our live stream. In fact, it looks like SpaceX was taking some measures we hadn't seen in the past to cut the time needed down as much as possible. Before they had even rolled Ship 33 out to the pad, we managed to spot this on Megabay 2. This is a Department of Defense mass explosion warning sign on the outside of Megabay 2. These signs are required to be placed anywhere where volatile or explosive devices or substances are located. The glaring question is, why would this be on the outside of Megabay 2? While rockets are literally powered by explosive propellants, typically when they are stored or under construction, those propellants are nowhere near, with the exception of solid rocket boosters. But Starship doesn't use those. In other words, seeing a sign like this on the outside of Megabay 2 means something else is going on, and it seems like the most likely explanation is that SpaceX has begun installing the FTS, or Flight Termination System, onto Ship 33. Okay. If that is the case, this would be a drastic departure from SpaceX's usual process. Typically, the FTS are installed after the ship has been rolled to the launch pad, as it is much safer to have active explosives on your vehicle for as little time as possible. That said, considering Starship still hadn't arrived at the launch pad by the 7th and SpaceX needed to complete the full wet dress rehearsal before launching, they likely wanted to get as much done as possible before. So that's the flight termination system checked off the list, but there were still a few more things the ship needed to do before it was ready for launch, and one of those was to receive its payload. Not a banana. For the first time ever, Starship will carry a useful payload. 10 dummy satellites designed to be the same weight and size as their real Starlink satellite counterparts, which will be the main payload of Starship launches initially. As the original launch date got closer, these satellites were still in the Star Factory. This changed on the 6th when Ship 33 was finally lifted off the work stand and onto a transport stand in Megabay 2 for payload integration. It was time to load the Starlink dummies into the ship. With the Starlink loader, a special contraption built for this task in the high bay, SpaceX decided to manually lift each dummy into the ship with a crane. What? This was a bit surprising, to be honest, as we were expecting the ship to roll over to the high bay for loading operations. However, it appears SpaceX had other plans. They may have done this to save time, as an extra rollover to the high bay may have taken too long. However, it's also possible that these dummy satellites couldn't be loaded with the equipment they already had. The PEZ dispenser is a brand new concept, a specialized storage and deployment system for one specific kind of payload that you want to get to space over and over again. In the same way as the rocket, it'll take time to perfect. With Ship 33 now on the transport stand, we could finally get a good look at it for the first time since its static fire a couple of weeks ago, showing us just how much work SpaceX had done during this time. Of course, just on the outside. We knew Ship 33 would undergo a few more changes following its static fire thanks to SpaceX's website update with all the information about Flight 7. Now we can finally see those changes. But before I tell you about that, we've looked into our channel metrics and there are over 2 million returning monthly viewers who have not subscribed yet. Please help us improve the channel even further by double checking that you've hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our updates. And while you're at it, give us a like and become a wise supporter. Why? Because you'll gain access to a massive amount of extra content. With it, you get access to daily new Starbase photo galleries, including all those we've posted so far. Satellite, aerial and ground photos, more than 400 posts in the past 2 years alone, with up to 7 picture galleries per week, insights, chats with me, you name it. Thank you so much, you rock. Now back to all the changes SpaceX made to Ship 33. The most obvious of these is the reduced size of the heat shield. It's shrinking. SpaceX initially tested this reduced heat shield on Flight 6 with Ship 31, and after seeing how successful that was, it looks like they've decided to test it again with their Block 2 ships. Every tile removed from spots that don't need extensive shielding reduces the weight carried to space by a few kilos, or pounds. SpaceX will keep on slimming Starship down from here on as much as they possibly can, but that wasn't the only change. There's a second reason why SpaceX wants to strip away the heat shield in this location. The ultimate goal of the Starship is for it to be caught by the tower, just like the booster. However, that process can be fairly violent, especially for the areas that are directly in contact with the chopsticks. Besides the weight, this is why SpaceX has been trying to remove the tiles in this area, as they are too fragile. Very fragile. This also means that the catch pins will likely be where these tiles come back. Looking at where SpaceX is keeping the tiles, we can see what appears to be a spot just for those pins. We're still waiting to see the exact design for these, however we know SpaceX will test a rudimentary version on this flight. There are likely even more changes, however those are the most visible throughout the ship. With the ship now ready, there was only one thing left to do: roll the ship to the pad. But before it could do that, its counterpart, Booster 14, needed to be ready. While it appeared that it was, on the 4th, SpaceX decided to roll the hot staging ring lifter to the launch pad. Why? There's only one reason SpaceX might need to do this. If they need to access components under the hot staging ring, the ring would need to be removed. On the 6th, one of SpaceX's LR-11000 cranes was moved over to Pad A before lifting up the load spreader and then putting it right back down because the winds were too high. Then later that night, the load spreader was picked up again before finally being able to attach it to the hot staging ring to bring it back down to the ground. Yes. After that, teams were able to once again access all the sensitive components near the top of the booster to make whatever changes were necessary and perform any final checks before this beast would take to the skies. It seems the checks didn't take too long, as the very next day the crane was hooked up to the hot staging ring again before being lifted back into the air to be placed on top of Booster 14. There we go. This should hopefully be the last major task Booster 14 needs to complete before it's joined by Ship 33. Speaking of which, right as the hot staging ring began its ascent back into the air, a road closure was finally posted to roll Ship 33 out to the pad. And sure enough, on the 9th, that's what finally happened, as the roads were closed and this first Block 2 ship finally began its trek to the launch pad for the first time and hopefully only time ahead of its flight. Our photographers managed to catch the roll. Ship 33 looks incredible. We've come a long way since the days of crinkled ships and cracked heat shield tiles. Cracked. And while making Starship out of stainless steel wasn't for aesthetic purposes, it does look remarkable. While many initially disliked the offset flaps of the Block 2 ships, they are definitely growing on me. How about you? When the ship arrived at the launch site, it was placed between the arms of the chopsticks. After a bit of waiting, it was lifted off the transport stand and placed atop the freshly installed hot staging ring. This is the first time these two vehicles have been stacked. With the ship now fully stacked on the booster, everything is ready, and as both vehicles have already received their FTS charges, SpaceX likely won't need to destack the ship before its flight. There's your reason for the process change: no destack needed. So all that's left is to perform a full wet dress rehearsal and then launch. Remember how I said we'd talk about the launch date later? The previously stated goal for the launch was today. But since that's no longer the case, when is it happening? SpaceX is all set to launch Flight 7. All the prep work is done and we received lots of help with one aspect from today's sponsor. A huge thanks goes out to MyRadar. Our work and SpaceX's work at Starbase depend on one obvious factor: Weather. It can be a huge hassle when working to capture that perfect shot of a rocket launch or when reporting about the daily workings at Starbase. My radar gave us advanced warnings allowing us to prepare for every storm and flooding, and we still make every launch stream happen while tracking the Starship at the same time. All with one completely free app, My Radar. We use My Radar to track weather risks for our 24/7 cameras and to keep the Y team at Starbase safe. Leading up to the launch, we monitor the weather closely with My Radar, which helps us track the clear skies that follow. It's incredible how much planning goes into launching a Starship. My Radar makes it easier, it does the same for you. With My Radar, you can track storms, set up custom alerts, monitor wildfires, and even follow orbital objects like Mars rovers, which is easily my favorite feature. Winter is here, Jon Snow. You're late. Track the cold. Know when to switch to winter tires and when to put on your extra warm jacket. Whether you're gearing up for a rocket launch or staying ahead of the cold, My Radar has got you covered. Click the link in the description to download it for free and stay informed about what's coming your way. My Radar is also your radar. Alright, back to the launch date. Here's the deal. SpaceX originally wanted to launch on the 10th. Since this episode is being released on the 10th, and since there hasn't been a launch yet, that is not going to happen. The first sign of a delay came from the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, for a launch on the morning of the 11th. However, given all the things that still need to be done, the backup dates posted alongside it are where it's at. Musk himself did a live stream stating that the launch would be pushed a bit because work on the ship was ongoing.
Starship Flight 7 looks like it's pushed about 3 or 4 days.
That's finished now, and SpaceX has confirmed it as well. The new not earlier than date for Starship Flight 7 is Monday, January 13th. The launch window opens at 4 p.m. Central Time, and I'll be going live with our stream 3 hours before liftoff to give you the rundown on everything important and to enjoy the launch with you. SpaceX is closely watching the weather, so this might still be pushed a bit if the weather down at Starbase doesn't want to cooperate. Get your popcorn ready. It's a slight delay, but compared to the delay for Flight 5, and considering that this is a completely overhauled design that we're getting to see launch less than 2 months after the previous one, that is pretty impressive. And while we are preparing for the launch with cameras and popcorn, SpaceX is prepping in a slightly different way. The force of a Starship launch is not to be underestimated. All it takes is looking at the old vertical tank farm SpaceX used to have next to Pad A, or really anything after the first flight. So to be safe, SpaceX is making some moves around the launch site. This includes partly disassembling the scaffolding SpaceX had built to construct the chopsticks for Pad B. They're running late. The force of the launch would have likely risked damaging or tipping it over, so disassembling it just to be safe is a smart move. And that wasn't the only thing SpaceX was moving around at the launch pad. Teams also decided to pick up and move an entire building. What? When your entire job is to build skyscrapers that fly, I guess a small building isn't too big a task. So teams loaded what is believed to be a server and control room for the propellant farm onto a self-propelled modular transporter, or SPMT, and moved it next to Hoppy. This was likely done to move it out of the way and make room for more work on the fuel farm. Perhaps it's no longer needed and will be shipped off later. While teams were moving the building, others were hard at work prepping different parts of the site to protect it against the force of a launch. In this case, it was not Flight 7 but all launches, as teams continued to install the protective panels onto the drawworks housing on Tower B. So that's the launch site. Moving our attention back to the build site and future vehicles, we have some truly incredible updates. Starting with the ship progress. In the last episode, we reported that SpaceX had begun significant development on Ship 38. However, we just heard something truly incredible. From the road, we can get a pretty good view of multiple prototypes. However, some are behind closed doors, such as Ship 34, which recently completed stacking. According to a source close to SpaceX, Ship 34 appears almost completely ready for its cryoproofing campaign, with likely only minor touches still needed. Yes! That bodes well for Flight 8. This aligns nicely with some footage SpaceX recently shared during their Flight 6 recap from around the time of Ship 33's static fire, but there are some things they saw that we had no clue about. While we can see many of the nose cones for the ships thanks to the wonderful windows SpaceX installed near the front of the Star Factory, we can't see all of them. We can currently see 3 nose cones in the Star Factory going up to what should be Ship 38. Thanks to a source close to SpaceX and the uptick in launch goals this year, as many as 8 ships could be well into production as of today, if not more. This means SpaceX should already be working on Ship 40. That is crazy, considering there was basically no hardware until just 6 years ago. In that time, they've gone from a flying water tower, we love you Hoppy, to having 8 of the world's largest and most advanced rockets in development at the same time. That is crazy. I'm not even talking about those that have already launched. This also shows just how much SpaceX is ramping up production of the ships. And considering the Star Factory only recently completed construction, things are only going to get faster from here. This is thanks to the ingenious design of this unique production facility, which SpaceX plans to use to achieve its goal of producing a Starship every few days from here. We'll break this down in a much more in-depth video later. Make sure you're still subscribed. The reason why I'm bringing this up again is because I'm constantly hearing from people who were subscribed but have magically been unsubscribed by YouTube. It's always worth it to double check. Another thing we seem to have been able to figure out was that the actual production line for the ships and the boosters look quite different. The parts for the ships are almost completely finished in the Star Factory before being stacked in Mega Bay 2. The boosters are only partly built in the Star Factory before being rolled over to the Mega Bay for stacking and full assembly. In other words, the Block 2 Starships seem complete by the time stacking is done, whereas the boosters still need massive amounts of work. However, that may change with the Block 2 boosters. SpaceX may only do it this way as a temporary solution until the more permanent Block 2 boosters come online, which may be sooner than you think. In fact, SpaceX is already producing the first parts for its Block 2 boosters, and we've already seen them. A few months ago, this piece of equipment was rolled out of the Star Factory. At the time, we speculated that it might be the header tank for a Block 2 booster. I am shocked to say that this isn't the case. What we previously thought was a header tank for Block 2, we now believe, or we now know, is the downcomer. You heard that right. This gigantic piece of hardware, which is around the same size as a Falcon 9 booster, is only the downcomer. It's meant to bring liquid methane to the 35 Raptor 3 engines of Block 2 boosters. What? This is absolutely insane. Starship has reached a scale so large that the downcomer is the size of a whole other rocket. At this point, they might as well make a stainless steel Falcon 9, considering they'll already be putting one inside the booster. This is truly hard for us to wrap our heads around, and it's also pretty shocking. At first glance, a downcomer this large seems overkill. It's doubtful that Raptor 3 or even Raptor 4, whenever it comes around, will require a flow rate high enough to warrant this large of a tube. So it may be a problem outside of flow rate, such as some sort of fluid dynamics problem related to flow speed rather than the rate that SpaceX has had difficulty figuring out. Having this downcomer may also allow SpaceX to completely ditch the header tank on the booster. The downcomer alone should be able to hold more than enough fuel, and the booster almost always experiences some form of acceleration to settle the propellant. Thus, a header tank may not be needed. However, that is just a speculation. It's likely that the part we had spotted was only a Pathfinder, given that it was rolled over to Sanchez. As it was spotted around 2 months ago, there is a good chance that the Block 2 boosters are even further into development now. The size of the hardware at Starbase is truly mind-blowing, even in comparison to other rockets, and it makes you wonder how big it will grow in the future. If this is only what Block 2 looks like, Block 3 may be entirely off the charts. We've seen some renders of Block 3 in the past, however those are pretty old and likely out of date now. Super Heavy Block 2 is just a slight change in height compared to Block 1. Block 3, however, will boost the entire stack to a surreal height of 150 meters. That's almost 30 meters more than everything we've seen so far. Good old Lady Liberty, boasting 93 meters, will have to look up quite a bit to see the top. That's it for today. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm. This is how you can help us for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. A new Raptor design and our brand new Starship Block 2 design are both up. Link is in the description and in the card you should see now. Also, check out our print store at shop.whataboutit.space to buy a picture for your favorite wall. A significant amount of every purchase goes directly to our photographers, and if you want to learn more about the fascinating story of SpaceX's Raptor 3 engine, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode. I was hooked up to the hot 35 header shield. The header shield. You will live always experience. Yeah.